Hello, welcome back. Ha 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 to those of my viewers who thank you made a comment or two on my prison stripes in the last video. If you're not up to speed, worry not. So for you, and especially for you, and you know who you are, today we are wearing the prison warden's grey, just to equal things out. As I said, you know who you are. I shall get on with reviewing my books. Haha. Okay, first one up is now look, she needs no introduction, does she? Sally Rooney, A Beautiful World, Where Are You? And look, there's a lot of conversation going on about Sally Rooney, and you know it's very divided. Do I think you should read this book? Yes, of course I do. I think any book that garners that amount of interest and conversation, and this is almost without saying yes I love her or no I don't. I think she hits right at that spot of what is it you're doing, you know, to what extent are we looking at our feelings, and you know, getting us to look at how the mechanics of the way she writes. But I mean, most of us read a book to say we're going to like it or we don't like it. Laura read this one, or hers is the review that I'm selecting to talk to you about this, and she goes right into the dynamics of the emotional response to Rooney. If you've read her and you've loved her, as Laura says, then you definitely should pick this one up. And if you haven't read, and go into it with an open mind. And I think that's really seriously good advice. Don't be swayed by what other people say. I'm only here telling you what to think. Laura's review really settles in on the I suppose in some ways the characters that Rooney has picked, and I think Laura's quite right when she says I think she's kind of just selected random people and said I'm going to write those ones. So we have two very intelligent women, Alice and Eileen, and we have two men, Felix and Simon, and it's about this. It's about the articulation of their relationships, and these two very intelligent women email each other, and this is where I find it interesting that we are sort of critiquing the intelligence, or Rooney's writing of people's intelligence, and isn't it posturing, is it pretentious, what is she doing that for? Because they cover every single topic. Now, I'll read you some of what Laura says, because she's got some lovely lines here. She said, talking about these people, she said she thought that the philosophical conversations were there to broadcast their sort of intellect and intelligence, and found that it was a little bit unnatural. Now, I think this is very stylized. I think she's right. It was ironic, she says, how worldly and knowledgeable they were when simultaneously they weren't self-aware at all. And we admit that, well, that's how complex humans and human relationships can be. Laura goes on to say she doesn't shy away from the taboo, whether it be awkward sex, problematic characters, or toxic relationships. But in a weird way, and I like this one sentence that she says, it felt intrusive reading it. And I do believe that that's exactly what Rooney is trying to create with her writing. She is a fabulous author, and she's Irish. Give it a go. Here I'm slamming things. Now the next one up is Cutter's End by Margaret Hickey, and you can get a feel from the cover what we're going to be in. Desert highway, remote town, a murder that won't stay hidden. So we're in, yes, that rural noir. Now, Laura read this one. Again, there are a good few of her reviews that are humming for me, that pin it down beautifully, so I'm going to use those. She says, look, she went into it saying, oh my goodness, we're in this kind of phase of rural noir. Is it going to be another dry? Is it going to be in that genre that we're reading quite a lot of? And look, why should we not have our rural noir? This is where Australian writing is becoming really interesting, and there's a lot of it on the market, and we have to weed out the ones that stand out for a particular reason. Laura liked this one because she said it's not one of those pacey, zippy ones, but it's got this really clever slow burn. Her exact words, which I love, that she loves what Hickey does, which is she loves the artful way that Hickey slowly and purposely draws back the covers on this crime. So we have a 32-year-old body of someone called Michael Denby, who was the local hero, very sort of revered character at Cutter's End. He's found in the desert, burnt, broken leg, in a pretty tragic state, and there are other murders that resemble it. Was it all what it had seemed to be? So the case is reopened. It's a slower pace for Laura, which she thinks, and this is an excellent point, it allows the reader time to connect with the characters. And that's something I think that we are critical of when we're reading is, do we like them? Do they feel believable? Were they rounded? And whether we like it, whether we think we're thinking critically or not, if we're readers, we're aware of whether we're liking and why we're liking and whether we actually believed those characters. So that comes to us from Penguin. Very nice one, and I would say, you know, Laura feels it's got a very satisfying, very fulfilling end, so you might look out for that one. Now, see, everything happens in Laura's house as far as I know. Laura's mum read this one. We all know Natasha Lester. You probably read, or you mightn't have. What do I know? This one is based on a true story, and Laura's mum read it and came up with these, you know, a succinct, very beautifully put little review. It is little, it's not meant to be big. She says it's a beautifully moving, heart-rending piece of fiction inspired by a true story. So the Riviera House, this book will have you enraptured from start to finish, moving seamlessly from the war-torn Paris during World War II to the present day on the magnificent French Riviera. So we have a lot of that glamour going on. There's courage, endurance and sacrifice which are inextricably entwined throughout both eras, with love and art at the forefront, and it is a must read. I can't do better than that. One of those master storytellers, you know, that'll keep us entranced. That one comes to us from Hachette, a lovely one. Another one, now I don't get an awful lot of you rushing in for fantasy, and you have to be able to weed out in fantasy. I think it's an underrated, sci-fi fantasy are vastly underrated for what we think they are. And they often stand as metaphors. Here I am lecturing you, maybe I should change jobs. No, I don't think I want to change jobs. And I think it's another thing, this is really Laura's very favourite area. And again, she has talked about this one in the most glowing terms. So if you haven't picked up fantasy before, you could start with this one. Kristoff has written broadly. He's a very, very well-respected fantasy writer. And this one has knocked Laura's socks off. So she says, we're in a domain of vampires who have taken over the world, and humanity's only hope is, to get through this, is locked up in a tower guarded by these very same vampires. And this person, Gabriel de Leon, his great name, isn't it, is the last vampire hunter, and the story is his story of what has led up to this, the bloody battles, the war of humans against vampires. She says it's an intricate and very interesting world, and I think that's essential for fantasy. There are fascinating and complex characters because Gabriel de Leon is not only unlikable, but he's also lovable. So just when you think his black heart can't get any blacker, he does something that makes him forgivable for some of the things he's done. And that he's very complex but not inconsistent, pointing out that that is something that we often, readers will take writers to task over, but that was an inconsistent with his personality. And I think we have to sort of say, no, you can be, look at us. I mean, we're all a bit of everything. And this, she says, gives us access to the layers that make up a person and allows us to connect. This is our word. Religion, faith, the dilemma of, let's say, sacrificing one for the many. They're all covered in this. So we'll have theoretical and moral questions. So it's very deep, and those layers will let us explore many, many things. Addictive, thought-provoking, entertaining, and soul-crushing. Again, sink your teeth into this one. But it will be a adult fantasy, but you possibly could go for this one, 17 up. New series to try out. That comes to us from HarperCollins. Nice little one. Next one up is a wee one from Ultimo Press called My Friend Fox by Heidi Everett. I read this one. The opening pages are lyrical perfection. That is all I can say. This really is one of my reading areas. It's sort of personal trauma, but I love poetics. This is what I study to a certain extent. And Heidi Everett, once I had read her first couple of pages, which is about the fox, I just said, I will follow this woman right through her story without questioning where she goes. And I can't give a higher accolade than that. She's an Australian writer. She was diagnosed with a schizophrenic disorder, and we follow her in and out of the psych wards in this part of the world. She originally came from Wales, and she uses the fox not only as a part of her childhood. She has a very strong memory and bond with the fox, but she also is using the fox as that metaphor for the person who lives on the fringes, the outcast, the person who never quite belongs. And in Australia I find that a doubly interesting narrative, because already the fox is sort of, well, obviously hunted in its own native surroundings, but here it's not that it's hunted, it's just that it doesn't jolly well belong, has nothing so to do with this country, in a sense, being non-native, but of course that's a whole other discourse. I think that when we're reading metaphors about mental being neurodivergent or the oppression of our mental health and what we have to do, it can be suitably bleak, sometimes downright just I can't relate to this, because I am one of the people who might not, I don't know about this and I don't want to know about this. That's what we're up against. And we need writing like this to make us say, blooming heck, how did I get through a whole description on living on the streets, what I did with my body, what abuses of substances did I do and become, aware of, not aware of. It is an absolutely fascinating read, but I will tell you one thing, there's the most gorgeous dog, and I think loyalty comes up in this. That dog, I felt a bit like her dog, I'd have followed her anywhere. She also has these wonderful illustrations, and the illustrations vary in their their perfectness, because if you look at the detail of this horse that she dearly loves, she has a great love of horses, you'll see that she swaps from one style, and it seems to reflect her mental state. A lot of metaphors going on, very, very clever, and it comes to a very beautiful place. Again, it's small, it's a wonderful gift that's to get you to think about the things maybe we take for granted and how difficult things are for some people, but all in this language that you hear the animals speak, of course. She got me with that one. Oh, I might be getting emotional. And that's not sarcastic. It's a glorious book. Glorious, glorious, glorious. All right, this is our book of the month, Me Believe in Me by Lucy Neave. This comes to us from, and here I'm looking, University of Queensland Press. Oh my goodness gracious me. To be 100% honest with you, and I do like to try to be, I've gone red because I got emotional about this book. Another book I got emotional about. My first issue, if you like, with this book was, well, what is that cover doing? You have to read the book in order to work the cover out, and I think that's a bit of a giggle in a lot of ways. This is an astonishing read. Neave is, I think, giving a masterclass on writing how geography, how the notions of space define our identity. Ostensibly, it's the story about a young girl, Sarah, who is living in New York, upstate New York, and she lives with her mother and brother, and her relationship with her mum is very sort of remote. You feel this already. And she's sent off with this pastor to do, because they belong to a kind of evangelical church, I presume. I don't want to call it a cult, but it feels that way. Sent off with this pastor, and she's very young, to do 3 months of missionary work in Idaho. And in the confined space of the train, the pastor there, is it consent, is it not consent? It's very hard to work out. Because she's a nice girl and has been taught to be nice to people, and because she doesn't want to hurt their feelings, she goes along with things. The story's written from the point of view of Bette, the daughter, who is trying to piece together her mother's life and therefore work out her own life. With respect to that, so I presume it's also about how we situate ourselves compared to other people. So the young Sarah, who's on this train and is assaulted, if you like, but she doesn't know that that's what it is. There's a huge amount of innocence and ignorance. Gets pregnant and is sent to Sydney, where she's supposed to have the baby and hand it over to her family member. So her mother back in New York sends the money for the plane ticket, says, be gone, we don't want to have to see this. And she gives birth to this baby, and the baby's supposed to be like those Magdalene was meant to be given up. It's not given up. She's saved by a magnificent woman, midwife, and this child is this Bet. I just couldn't put the book down. I needed to know, was Bet going to turn out all right? Believe me, believe in me. She does. It gets to a great place, which I kind of tongue-in-cheek saw a little reference to Some Like It Hot. It just could be me. It's my book of the month because I think you have to read it. Give it a go. Don't just give it a go. Read it. Come in, ring me up, buy it. Great. Truly great. Next one, The Long Game, Simon Rowell. This one's getting a bit of a buzz, and I have no idea where I put my notes for this one. So anyway, it is, I'll have to memorise what I've said because I can't find anything anymore. It is a text book, thriller, and it's getting a lot. I only really picked it up. There are, as I said, a lot of Australian noir. I picked it up because I saw that it was getting a lot of interesting reviews from places where I would say, yes, I like what they say, so that would make me read it. It's one of those procedural thrillers, and customer came in and we chatted about it, and she had really loved it. Well, she didn't come in, she was talking over the phone about her next rural thriller, and she had read this one. Police procedural. Now, what this customer had loved is that it's situated in Portsea and in Melbourne, so we have that police procedural. We have a young woman, Zoe, who comes back to look into a case where there's a murdered surfer. He's going through a divorce with his wife Donna, and his best friend Dwayne has found the body, and it's all very traumatic. And Zoe comes in, and Zoe is, I think, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So she's got a little dog too. I do like it when they all have little dogs. He's a Labrador Golden Retriever called Harry. And Harry is an essential part of her stabilising her world. And this is revealed in flashbacks. Zoe's feisty, and she's a bit of a loner. And one of the things that I like that character, and I also like the fact that one of the points that this customer had said to me was she had a sidekick, Charlie, or a colleague, and he was pretty bland, so that, I suppose it was meant to be a foil for Zoe's sort of character, but she'd have liked to have seen that character develop. So will we be getting more in this series? It's quite pacey, but it's very much, if you like police procedural like Catherine Firkin, you're right in the same territory with this one. And of course, I love Catherine Firkin. I love her writing. All right, just two more there, just ones to keep your eye out for, because they're in the, one of them's in the shop, which is The Women of Troy. I will pop it there. This is a reading copy. I think that the actual copy that's just come in is a bit bigger. A lot of you read Silence of the Girls, the story of Briseis. And this is the next one, The Women of Troy. Again, she is the writer, apart from Madeline Miller. You all know I love Circe and Song of Achilles, but in that vein, there is no one to beat Pat Barker. And if you have liked the first one, which was called Silence of the Girls, then you will love that one. And if you haven't read The Silence of the Girls, start with that one and then read that one. You see, I'm making it very easy for you. Last one up, only just so that you know. It'll be in soon. This is Liane Moriarty from Macmillan. It's called Apples Never Fall. A lot of you pre-ordered that one. I'm just letting you know. Look at that lovely apple. That's a lovely book. It'll be in on September the 14th. So rush to the computers or to the phone and book your copy now. That's it from me. That's your pile. They're very different. I like to be eclectic. Thank you to Laura for her wonderful reviews. You speak to Laura on the phone when you do ring, so you can always ask her what she's reading. And next time I'll work on my sartorial presentation and try. Well, I put my owls in for you today just so I didn't look too severe me. I will talk to you again in a little while, and I hope there's something in there that you'd love, and there will be more coming up in a little while. I can't say when, because with the times we live in, it's whenever it takes my fancy. See you soon.